And Alex is getting ready for his prize fight.
Yeah.
All right. We are live, everybody. Happy Friday. We're just waiting for everybody to get here, and then we will go ahead and record the podcast.
Happy Friday. Happy National Coffee Day for you coffee drinkers out there.
I was actually did I see a straw there, or do you have some do you have some coffee?
Not coffee, I have tea actually.
Oh.
YouTube universe, he has betrayed you. You know where to get him.
No, I'm kidding. I don't even drink coffee, so it doesn't even matter. Besides, everything I've seen on TV tells me that Starbucks is actually a horrifying place because it's horribly aggressive.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
So this is usually the point before we record the podcast where, as an added treat for those who actually get into the live chat, we will be discussing a few other stories that didn't necessarily make the cut this week. This year. Yes, we record yearly, as in 7 days is apparently a year now. It's a full-on solar cycle. I don't even know what has to go wrong to make that a thing. And let's pray we never ever find out. Let's see.
It might be the case on certain planets, but who knows?
That may be the case on certain planets, but what would it take for that to become a thing here? That's the question that you really should ask. Is how many things have to go wrong before that happens? I hope we never find out.
Well, I suppose we could tweet at Neil deGrasse Tyson. Maybe he has an answer.
No. Yeah. So the first story that we have tonight is so this is a follow-up, but unfortunately it really isn't saying anything different. James Cameron has since replied to Patty Jenkins and Linda Carter, basically maintaining his stance on Wonder Woman and continuing to use Sarah Connor as an example of how he did not sexualize a woman on camera. And it's like, okay, you keep on using Linda, but, well, you did have giant blue aliens and loincloths. So I'm sorry, James, but at some point we have to acknowledge that you have done this stuff. Huh?
I think a more egregious example would be like True Lies.
True Lies, yeah, the striptease. I'm going to dare say that, because, I mean, here's the thing. I can't remember which one it is, but it's become a horror trope. I do know that there's an Alien movie where we get to see Ripley in fatigues, so the tank top and underwear. And I don't know if it was his movie or if it was Ridley Scott's movie that did that. And if it's James Cameron's movie, that's sexualizing a woman. I'm sorry.
I think that was she does that in the first movie where she's kind of stripping out of a flight suit to get into a spacesuit because she's going to depressurize the craft to blow the alien away.
Well, wasn't there like a moment where she's holding a gun or whatever and taking on aliens and she's in those fatigues?
Yeah, she's like that in Aliens too.
Okay, so
I don't think Cameron's complaints is that. I don't think his complaints though are really that she's sexualized. I thought more of his complaints were just like, I still didn't quite understand what his complaints were.
His complaint is that she's sexualized. His complaint is that she is sexualized. Let me see if I can bring up the actual quote for you. Let's see. Not this story.
Linda Carter slams thuggish James Cameron over Wonder Woman comments.
That's not the one. It's the one that happened before that. Give me a second.
I know, but I'm thinking this will at least... I
don't know. It may have a link.
I'm sure that. Give me a moment. I'm sure it'll refer back to it.
The one that I'm talking about did link to the previous stuff, so you would be able to get access
Cameron
to that.
Cameron started all of this by saying in an interview with The Guardian that Wonder Woman was just male Hollywood doing the same old thing. He seems to think because Gal Gadot, the actress who played Wonder Woman, is attractive enough to win Miss Israel pageant. Her character is just a sex object. So I guess, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And this isn't progressive. He talks examples on female, Sarah Connor.
So that's what I'm saying, guys, is that unfortunately it's not really him saying anything different. Linda Carter is not really saying anything different in those stances. It's pretty much just the standoff has resumed kind of thing. And in case you guys cared, we're going to rebump this tweet, or we're going to rebump this forum thread where we're arguing kind of thing. So that's the sad part there. Another one that people wanted to, particularly Blizzard fans, wanted me to talk about because you don't really care, Alex, is that literally today, we're getting close to BlizzCon season, and BlizzCon for the most part is the springboard that Blizzard announces any major announcements for their games. So that includes World of Warcraft, that includes StarCraft Remastered now, StarCraft 2, Diablo 3, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, and Hearthstone. And we have officially confirmed that there will actually not be any Diablo 3 announcements at this year's BlizzCon. Now, a lot of people were hoping that we would... Well, we've been hoping about this for the last couple of years, but we would get the announcement that we have a feeling is coming of Diablo 4. That is not happening this year. We do know that the team is working their butts off to have a big announcement for us, but it's not going to be this year. It's going to have to get moved all the way to next year, probably. My thoughts are it's disappointing, but frankly, here's the thing. Last year at BlizzCon, they tried to have announcements for every single game, and their big announcement for StarCraft 2 was they're working with an AI company. I gotta say that since I'm a StarCraft fan, that deflated me a little bit about last year's BlizzCon. So I'd rather have no announcement than in my opinion, a bad announcement. So there you go. There really isn't too much to add there, but I would assume that, Alex, you'd have kind of the same opinion. You'd rather have no news from a developer than a really craptastic announcement that doesn't really have anything to do with the game.
Yeah, I'd say that would be my stance on it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's kind of the issue that we're running into, and I know that a lot of people want major announcements. I mean, we're going to get a BlizzCon virtual ticket announcement of some kind of a Diablo skin that you're going to be able to get, but that's probably going to be it. And you know what? I'm okay with that until they have something legit to announce, which is probably going to be Diablo 4. I'm going to hold true to it. Another one that people wanted us to talk about was Red Dead Redemption 2. It got a trailer. I have seen the trailer, at least bits of the trailer, and it does look interesting. Am I going to pick it up to review it? Yeah, probably. But people kind of remember my thoughts on Red Dead Redemption, so I'm not promising that I'm going to like it. Have you seen the trailer at all? Because it's been spamming on YouTube.
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. I'm thoroughly convinced that anybody who watched a video today at least once saw the Red Dead Redemption 2 trailer. And for me, it was mandatory twice.
Twice.
I was not. Yeah, I couldn't skip. So like early in the morning,
usually I just try.
And later in the afternoon, I got a skip button. So
yeah. Usually, if I get stuck with one of those, I like to try and refresh the video a few times to see if I can get especially if it's like a long ad or something I really, really am sick of or don't care about.
This was on Roku. You can't refresh it.
Oh, okay.
You go back and forth, but it won't change it. No, there has to be actually something done so that it doesn't not force you to, or it doesn't not give you a skip button. Usually what happens there is like if a trailer's brand spanking new, at least in my assessment of it, if the trailer's brand new, they want you to see it at least once. So like they mandatory make you go through it, and then later on they'll give you a skip button because you've seen it before as far as their assessment is. So there we go.
Yeah.
Let's see. I know people wanted us to talk about the It sequel. I don't want to talk about it. I don't know. Like, if we had Romney here, maybe he'd have stuff to talk about, but I didn't see It, and I'm not interested in seeing It. So
it's just
sorry.
The sequel's just gonna be the second half of the story, basically. It's where it's like you've never seen the miniseries, have you?
No.
Okay.
No, this was one of those things this was one of those movies that if I brought that in, if anybody in my family brought that in, we would be murdered.
Right. Basically, well, the book and the miniseries both follow this suit. It's basically the story keeps jumping between them as kids and them as adults. Because the clown, the monster that is Pennywise the clown, reemerges like every 30 years to wreak terror. And so the story is basically, the adults, you see them as adults and they flash back to their childhoods. That's what the miniseries did. The movie, the new remake, just focused on the kids. It didn't do the whole jump back and forth
like,
in time
in
thing.
the book, they were flashing back and forth. What the movie did was it said all the kids stuff, we're putting all that together, and then the second movie would be like putting all the adult stuff back together.
That's exactly what they're doing, yeah.
All right, well, there you go. Here's another story that people want us to talk about, which is kind of depressing. That's why it got taken off, because, well, we don't have a Prozac budget anymore. So Volition, or is it Volition anymore? I can't remember, because like they mentioned Deep Silver in this too. Let's see. Yeah, Volition. So the Agents of Mayhem developer Volition has reportedly been hit by layoffs. So according to Kotaku, more than 30 people have been let go from the Saints Row studio located in Illinois. Let's see. Deep Silver, and so they do work with Deep Silver. Deep Silver is reportedly dissatisfied with the sales of Agents of Mayhem, which released last month. IGN has reached out to the publisher for a comment, obviously. So it's not good news. So 30 people have lost their job after the release of Agents of Mayhem.
Man, that's like the gaming industry in a nutshell.
I feel
it's
bad
like the
for
gaming
it.
industry every week.
I don't want to hear studios going dead. I have my favorite studios. You have your favorite studios, but we never ever want to hear of another studio having issues, because if they do, then eventually that ripple effect happens, and we might actually see it in the studios we care about. And so at that point, like, Volition has some good titles under their belts. Obviously, their most recent accomplishments have been Saints Row. Agents of Mayhem is their most recent release. I don't like hearing people having to fail to the point where they have to fire or lay people off. That sucks. It's never fun. But unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it went. Now, if you guys are just barely joining us, so we're actually getting ready to record in the next 10 minutes or so, then we will get into the stories that we have tonight. But right now, we're going over the stories that didn't, unfortunately, make the cut today. So there you go. We're currently talking about Volition and the fact that they had to lay off at least 30 people because of the poor sales resulting from Agents of Mayhem. So, I mean, what else can we say aside from we don't want to hear a studio's doing bad, but at the same time, if your game's inferior,
again, it's just that's the problem in this industry. It feels like that's like such a regular occurrence. I don't think I'm truly amazed people ever want to work in this industry.
The podcast, it's become a more regular thing, which is really sad. Like I still remember, like, before I started doing the podcast, it was like maybe a developer a year kind of thing that I would hear about. So like I heard about Factor 5 when that died. And I don't remember in that specific year if there were any other major, at least development companies that I was following that fell apart. But Factor 5 was a big deal because that was the Rogue Squadron company. So it was like, oh, holy crap, that sucks. But I will admit, since I'm starting to wonder if this is a bad luck sign. The fact that I started this podcast, we just start hearing about studios laying people off left and right, or closing, or something.
I think it's just, unfortunately, games are getting so expensive to make now.
Yeah, that too.
Don't you just love inflation?
Yeah, tell me about it. So let's see, any other stuff that we want to get into, because we have like 10 minutes before we got to get started. That pretty much covers a lot of the stuff that people wanted us to know about. People wanted to know, since Romney, you're the only one that could really go into this. Have you seen it, and are you in fact excited for the sequel?
I have not seen the remake of It. I haven't been able to carve out the time since things have been pretty busy lately.
Yep. Okay, so the fact that you're just barely hearing now that it will receive a sequel, is that a good or a bad idea to you?
Well, I know that the movie is based on the first half of the book, so honestly, it's not that surprising.
Okay. Oh, and here's the final story that didn't make it because somebody wanted us to talk about this. I don't know why. So how many people actually know in this panel of the series Kung Fu?
The David Carradine series?
No.
Yeah, there you go. So apparently Arrow's Greg Berlanti, I believe he's like the head guy behind Arrow, is now developing a female-led TV reboot of Kung Fu.
Okay, now I know people may think,
Of course they are.
Yeah, now hear me out. I know many people may think that this is a bad idea, but there actually is a piece of history they could pull from. Now, back when I went to Slick, I studied Wing Chun Kung Fu. And Wing Chun is actually a style that was actually invented by a woman and designed with women in mind. So it's actually, out of all of the female-led reboots, a female-led Kung Fu is actually kind of plausible.
It's plausible, but the only thing that I'm worried about is I didn't hate it, but I saw the sequel series that got launched years later on, I think it was strictly TNT. And yeah, I hate to admit it, like I liked it, but it still had lots of problems. And especially one of them being, I think it was actually not like it was his, because David Carradine came back, but then also they had a person to play his son, and I think it was his actual son that played him.
Yeah, I'm not sure the specifics. I just remember that it's not that David Carradine came back, but he wasn't technically playing Kwang Chai Kane. He was playing a descendant who also just happened to be named Kwang Chai Kane because reasons.
Actually, never mind. It wasn't his son. His son went on to go, because I remember.
Yeah, wasn't it Brandon Lee?
The only thing I found interesting about Lizzie McGuire was the dad was played by David Carradine's son.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't, I could have sworn, wasn't it Brandon Lee that played the son in that sequel series?
No, I don't remember the name of the guy, but it was not Brandon Lee.
Yeah, because I know
wasn't Brandon dead by that point?
Maybe. I remember that Brandon Lee was, but when he was trying to act, got his start in television.
Continues. Oh my gosh, it's on Netflix. I can watch it. Let's see if I'll get you a cast in a second.
But
let's see. David Carradine, Chris Potter played Peter Kane.
Oh, I see.
So there you go. And I mean, I'm not saying it was bad. I'm not saying it was good. I'm not saying it was bad. I like it. In fact, now that I know it's on Netflix, maybe I'll go watch it.
Yeah. My only hope is that we can actually get someone who actually is Asian this time, because I know that the whole reason we got David Carradine was because studios was like, no one's going to pay to see an Asian actor because, studios are run by dumbasses.
This makes me think back to Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. What's the matter? David Carradine turned you down?
Yeah. Now, to be fair, the way that film presents the creation of the TV series Kung Fu is technically incorrect. It is true that Bruce Lee was working on a martial arts Western TV show, and Kung Fu just happened to come out around the same time that he was trying to get people interested in his show. It just was an unfortunate coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. And for those who have never ever actually seen Kung Fu: The Legend Continues, if you've seen Walker, Texas Ranger, you're really not too far off.
Yeah, maybe stick with the original series, because at least there it has the added mystique of it being a martial arts series, but set in the Wild West.
It really is, like, because it would have Walker, Texas Ranger-esque plots, but it's all based in city. So at that point, you like have all city, but you would occasionally, like, one of the things that I find funny about Kung Fu compared to Walker is that, Walker had to have that obligatory moment where Chuck Norris roundhoused something. It doesn't have to be a person. He just has to have roundhoused something. And in Kung Fu's case, it was the, I don't know the actual name of the move, but it's like the put your hands together and push the water kind of thing. They always had to have David Carradine end a struggle with that. And it was like, okay. It doesn't matter that your son probably does more Kung Fu on this show than you do. You end the struggle every time. I think I broke Romney. I broke Romney. I broke the series, and therefore I broke Romney. He's like, dang it, you spoiled it for me. He'll be right back. So that's pretty much the stories that we had this week. Now, I am going to also add another story into the agenda tonight, just because we don't know a whole lot, so I don't think it'll take too much time to go over. But it is a quick update for you guys. So don't worry too much about that. We're going to give Romney a couple of minutes, and then we'll get started. And we got a pretty big show tonight. So we're going to be talking about the Atari-box. We're going to be talking about the video game voice actor strike. That's going to be a thing. We also have some Nintendo talk. Unfortunately, it's not of the positive variety. We also have a carryover from last week that we couldn't get into. We have, and I blame the Shadow Blazer for this, a live action Your Name adaptation that we have to talk about tonight. But that's okay. I got my vengeance on it. Well, because you're the one that brought the story. I would have been happy in my ignorance. And then, but that's okay because I actually got back at Alex because we'll have to talk about a live action Sword Art Online. So there you go.
I thought we might have talked about that before, but maybe not. Maybe I've just because I've been hearing so much about it for a while.
It's made the agenda a couple of times, but I can tell you I've cut it out a couple. I've cut it out a few of those. Like 75% of the time I've cut it, and it's simply because there's no development. But now we actually have a development.
Right.
We have people in charge now. Everything good, Romney?
Yeah, for some reason my modem had a hiccup, had to go and fix it, but now we seem to be good. I just had to kidnap a gnome goat in a quick panic and sacrifice it.
I was going to say, David Carradine heard us talking horrible things about him and he kung fu'd your internet.
I think it was the ghost of Bruce Lee because we were debunking what was presented in his autobiographical film. Not autobiographical, biographical.
That too. Okay, well, if you guys are good to go, let's go ahead and get things started.
Okay.
All right.
Good to go.
There we go.
On speed.
3, 2, 1. All right. Let's get everything set up on my screens here, and then here we go. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek for Friday night, September 29th, 2017. I am, of course, your host, Adam Mickelson, a.k.a. Drac. I hope everybody's had an awesome Friday as well as an awesome rest of the week. And for me, it's been just busy because I've been working nonstop on podcasts all week. And I've got quite a bit of work done. You guys can already see that on the channel. And we'll probably advertise some of that in a little bit. But of course, welcome to the podcast. And we are being joined by my fellow panelists, fellow YouTubers, fellow geeks, fellow awesome guys. In general, if you're not following them, you should be. And we're going to start things off with the Shadow Blazer, who in turn has decided to grace us with his presence by stepping out of the shadows, especially for the ladies. Oh, my. Alex, how you doing tonight?
You know, it's funny. I've only ever been in the shadows in one video of mine, intentionally anyway, besides just poor lighting choices. But otherwise, I'm okay. I'm fair, I suppose. It's been a tough couple days, not just because of work, though work has gotten crazy for a bit, but it was, I don't want to get too much detail here, but it was just yesterday that unfortunately I had some bad news drop on me that I found a friend of mine passed away some time ago. I don't know exactly when. I don't know the circumstances around it. It's just, it was somebody I've known for quite a while and only really online. It's never been like personal, but it's still a friend nonetheless. And it kind of hit me hard for a bit.
So everybody needs to send their love and respect to the Shadow Blazer via his Twitter. And that would be an awesome thing for you all to do. Actually, I find it funny that you bring up the fact that you've only come out of the shadows at least once. Technically, the podcast would like to remind you that you've come out of the shadows many times. And in fact, one of the things I actually liked when you first started on the podcast, people probably don't know the story, where somebody thought you were a Todd in the Shadows ripoff. And thought you were a poor one because you weren't even trying to make the mask that Todd tries to do for his videos. So you've got that going for you.
I did borrow. That was actually what I was talking about, is the fact I did borrow Todd in the Shadows formula for an episode as my little homage to him, because I like Todd in the Shadows. I follow him. Even though I don't listen to a whole lot of pop music, I do enjoy his content. So for one video, I decided to pay homage to him and kind of borrow his format because I was doing a music-based video review. So that's what I was getting at, is I've only ever really been officially in the shadows on camera once.
Yep. All right. And then we're also being joined by Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost, of Romney's Reviews, From the Shelf, Rhapsody, and Cinema. Romney, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. This week was, well, had its fair share of ups and downs and been pretty busy since being sick for like 3 weeks set me back a bit. So I've been trying to get ready to get geared up for October for Monster Clash. And yeah, and Alex's story about a friend, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but let's just say with Alex finding out about one that had passed, for lack of a better term, one friend that we knew we met in person, but we've mostly communicated online since high school, recently reconciled over some really petty differences, mostly on my end. And so, yeah, that there's at least that. That was a good start to the week.
See, with the negatives come positives. This works out for everybody. All right. So with that, I'm glad that we hit our low unfortunately with Alex, and again, send your support to him. But also we hit a high with Romney being able to reconcile with a friend. That's how geekery works. The more you know. All right. And so we actually do have a lot of stories to get to tonight. And as much as I would like to be able to get into the additional stuff, and I feel bad for Alex, and I feel great for Romney, let's go ahead and get into things. So I did make a last-minute addition to the agenda, and it was simply because I don't think this story is going to take a whole lot of time. Simply because, even though a lot of people believe there's finality to it, Leonard French has reminded you otherwise. So, in case you hadn't heard this news, we have a little bit of an update on the Alex Maurer situation, and unfortunately, there isn't much. We do know that the court date for the Imagos versus Alex Maurer lawsuit has passed, and unfortunately, Alex Maurer was not prepared. Warcraft fans, do not pull out the meme. Do not. She was not prepared, and in turn, Leonard has decided to file for a default judgment in his client's favor. And I believe it actually does allow for a little bit of time for a response from Alex Maurer, which we got one. It was late, but we got one. And now the argument is that it is insufficient, according to Leonard French, insufficient to be able to move forward with the proceedings. So it looks like right now the default judgment might go through. However, a lot of people are already immediately assuming the court case is over, the verdict has been handed down, and I've gone to watch those live streams. The way that I understand it, the judge has not made a decision yet. It could easily go in their favor, but the judge has not made a decision yet. The default judgment has been submitted. The argument has been made. A counter argument has been made by Leonard French that this is insufficient material to be able to do that, but we do not have this thing finalized. So before you start popping the champagne corks, it's not done yet. But thankfully, as an additional update, we can actually happily announce that a majority, I believe there's still about 10% that are still working on their cases, but a majority of the YouTube channels that had videos taken down by Alex Maurer have been able to get their videos back up and running. So we at least have that. And it looks like on the court perspective, we're going to get a resolution hopefully very soon.
Yeah, but let's clarify a couple of things here. To explain it wasn't so much the court date. The judge had given Maurer two major deadlines. The first deadline, which passed first, of course, in August, was a deadline for her to secure counsel, which she did not.
No. And
then the second deadline, which barely passed this week, was the deadline to submit an actual response to the charges leveled against her by Imago Softworks and Dawn Thatcher, which she didn't. And then the late response, the reason Leonard French argues that it is not sufficient is because it was sent as an email to the clerk's office, not an official submitted response, which is why it could be considered insufficient. But it ultimately comes down to whether or not the judge will accept it, given that it was basically a hastily written email sent to the clerk with the notation that Alex Maurer is representing herself. It's very unlikely.
And I also believe he is making additional arguments that basically the accusations that she's making in her rebuttal, some of those, or not some of them, all of them have to be substantiated by some kind of proof, which she also has not provided with them. So Leonard is also arguing that it is insufficient because she hasn't been able to back up her claims, including the fact of, I want to say that she didn't demand this, but I have a feeling that she did demand additional contracts and things like that from Imago Softworks and quote, never received them. So at that point, I have seen Leonard make the argument that, yeah, additionally to what Romney has said, she also has not provided the sufficient paperwork that she needs to be able to go forth with her case.
Yes, and so to kind of clarify, it's not that there was a court date that she didn't show up at. It's just a case that she missed the 2 deadlines that the judge gave her way back in July to secure counsel and file a formal response to the accusations leveled against her. Both deadlines passed, and after the deadlines passed, then came a late response after Leonard French et al. filed the motion for a default judgment.
Exactly. So, I mean, at that point, basically the way that we know how this is going from here is that all of the necessary arguments have been submitted to the judge's clerk, which basically puts it in the judge's hands. Like the clerk can, the way that Leonard actually points it out is like the clerk by judge's order can dismiss it, but especially with insufficient grounds or insufficient paperwork, but it's technically in the judge's hands at this point. So the judge could be extremely sympathetic towards Alex Maurer and allow things to go forward, or she could easily just default judgment. This is the way it goes. So before people start popping the champagne corks, it's not done yet. Hopefully, I'm thinking within the next month or so, we'll get an answer, because, I mean, that's about as long as it takes to get a final judgment on this stuff, right, Romney?
It depends on the case, depends on how much both sides like. Given that most of the evidence that has been presented has come from Leonard French and Don Thatcher and Imago Softworks, it might, but even then, that's not a guarantee, especially considering we don't know how much of a fight Maurer is going to put up down the road.
We don't. But if the default judgment does get put in place, it does. I mean, she can technically take her case again, but it would be harder by that point.
Mm-hmm.
She would need sufficient proof. She would need to know what she was doing to be able to do it. Kind of thoughts on the matter? Are you already celebrating, or are you just saying, well, I'll wait until I have the final verdict in my hands?
Yeah, I've always been waiting for the final verdict. I kind of thought the end was nigh when Leonard announced he was seeking his judgment. Then Maurer responded, and I'm just like, lady, you were clearly not prepared for this. You really didn't think this through all the way.
And
so,
if you've seen her argument, I would also say that I can't compare this because, like, here's the lawyer on our panel, so he could probably compare it. But I would actually say that the paperwork itself is insufficient. It's basically her leveling a bunch of accusations. She's not backing it up with any kind of solid proof. And yeah, it just doesn't. I like a lot of her a lot of her claims. I don't think will be able to even hold up in court as a solid argument. So I really don't think this is. I think the default judgment is going to happen, and she's just going to have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my thoughts on the matter. But that's really all that we can say for now. When we get a final judgment, obviously we'll do another update and put a resolution to this. But let's go ahead and get started with the stories of the week. And the first one that we got to talk about is we have more information on the Atari-box. So in case people didn't know, this is actually a follow-up. We reported on this, I think, a month ago, that Atari was going to be following in Nintendo's footsteps, so to speak. They were going to be releasing basically an Atari 2600 Mini kind of thing, except that this was going to be different from it. We knew that it was going to have, like, the rumor was that it was going to be Switch-like in the fact that it might be handheld meets console. Now we actually have some answers. So it looks like it's going to be an open Linux-based console. It will be able to play current day games, kind of like the best way that after talking with people that I know how to describe it is that it is. I don't even want to say it is a Steam box, but it's like a step below a Steam box is what it's supposed to be doing, and it's based on Linux, unlike actual Steam boxes. And we also do have a pricing for it, and get ready to pull out your wallets, people, because it's going to be either $249.99 and $299.99, depending on specs and configurations during the Indiegogo pre-order campaign they're doing, which is going to kick off in spring of 2018. So it looks like this is going to be entirely digital. It's going to be something where you can play current games on it. It actually looks like it's pretty decked out spec-wise, but it does come with a very high price tag. So this was already kind of the worry that I think we had before. We didn't have a price tag before, but then they said that it would be able to play current games. And that, guys, it raises the price up always. So are we surprised at the $250 to $300 price tag here, or are we not surprised?
It's not that surprising. That's actually pretty decent compared when you compare it to the prices of, say, Xbox One or PS4, not even just the beefed up super versions, but like the base consoles.
You can get a fairly good Steam box for that.
Yeah, and I mean that's about the average price of a new 3DS basically is $299. So that's actually moderately reasonable, which I guess I'm surprised insofar as that, oh, well, they're trying to actually have competitive pricing instead of trying to undersell or like grossly undersell or grossly oversell.
But I do like the fact that we actually, the cool part about this is it's finally defined, because when we were talking about this originally, it was still like, oh, we're going to follow the NES Classic Mini. So we're going to fill this thing up with a bunch of old Atari games, but it will still be able to play current games. And so we couldn't get a lot of the questions answered that we had. Now we have them. It's going to be for modern consoles. I have a feeling since it's Linux based, sure, you can play some old school Atari games on it. I'm pretty sure they'll be able to work that in somehow. Alex, what about you? Is this enough to make you get the Atari-box?
No, the pricing is actually a little surprising to me.
Of course, it doesn't have dot hack on it.
Well, but it also, it's about on par with, say, the PS4 pricing wise, but I gotta think, how big is the installation base? I mean, the quote unquote you can play modern games, right? Or is this essentially going to be a Steam box where it's going to be able to link up to the internet? But how many games would actually be compatible to run on this hardware? Because obviously most people are designing for PS4, Switch, and Xbox One.
Yeah, but I mean, since it's PC, like I do know that with Linux you can be able to make that work. I don't have the tech specs in front of me. I think the only thing that was holding it back was hard drive. I don't think the hard drive was that big. So at that point, that might be the biggest thing, but it is going to be running with a customized AMD processor with Radeon graphics tech included. So, I mean, it could play them, but maybe space would be an issue. I mean, honestly, with what I've been able to tell from this and given its price tag, like I said, that's like the price of some of the like mid-range Steam boxes, and people that I've known that have bought those just buy them for indie games, which are stupidly easy to run. So at that point, I mean, if that's all you're planning on doing, I think you'd be fine. But I will admit that the $250 price tag it's not worth it to me. Not for a console complete with wood paneling. Sorry, I just can't make it work. But
yeah, I mean, for that price, you might as well, I think, just buy one of the major consoles like the Nintendo Switch or the PS4 or one, because you're going to have a much better install base.
Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm just saying, buying one of those, I think you're going to have a much better install base than what Atari is going to offer.
Yeah, it's really close to the Switch's range. So at that point, maybe, like if you're trying to get a PS4 or an Xbox One, you'll pay a little bit more, but the Switch, this is right in there. And frankly, you'd get a lot more, because here's the thing. This is coming out, the kickoff campaign for this is starting spring 2018. By then, Nintendo will have also had a lot of superior games come out for the holiday season. So yeah, it'll be definitely a better buy. But we wish we could say that was it. Unfortunately, it isn't, because with the also announcement of the Atari-box, we had a left hook thrown today that I have to bring up, which is that the Commodore 64 mini console has been announced. So for those who were fans or loved the old school Commodore 64, I'm pretty sure we could say James Rolfe isn't one of them. Basically following in the same format of the NES Classic Mini, you're going to be getting a mini version of the Commodore 64, which does clock in at 50% the size. The C64 Mini is a smaller recreation of the much-loved 1982 console, updated for modern audiences with high-definition output via HDMI. Yeah, so Now, this one is a little bit more adequately priced because when it comes out, I believe it's coming out early 2018, it's going to be about $70. So now the mini console also provides some extra bang for your buck with classics from the Commodore 64 like Iridium, Paradroid, Monty Mole, and Hawkeye. I know some of those titles, but I'm old. I need to bounce this to the panel. Do either of you know any of these titles?
Way before my time.
Same here, although one thing I will say is that one of the big complaints we're seeing in the comments of the IGN article reporting this is a bunch of people listing games that aren't listed as being included. Yeah. And so it's already running into the same issue that luckily the NES and SNES minis avoided, where it's a case of, oh, well, you've got fan favorite games that aren't included. What's the incentive to put down $70 to get this novelty retro recreation?
Yep, and I mean, you will get a bundled joystick with it and these games, but aside from that, if you want to plug a keyboard in there, because I mean, the thing looks like a keyboard, but obviously it isn't. It's outside, it's outside fluff. So I mean, you could plug a keyboard in there, you could plug in an additional joystick, but well, why would you? Because I'm not saying that it's a bad thing that this is coming out, and for $70, that's not horrible, but I didn't have love for the Commodore 64. I don't really know of anybody that did. I knew of a few friends that had Commodore computers and they hated them. They were very gladly moving over to PCs when those became available. You know, the old school IBM PCs. They were moving over as fast as they possibly could. So, yeah.
I mean, looking at this, it does say you can plug in a USB keyboard and use it as a fully functional home computer. So I guess if you want to pretend that you're doing computer stuff back in the 80s, I guess.
But I just don't see the allure here, especially like to this current generation. The earliest, like the NES Classic Mini works because people still know of those classic 8-bit games. But unfortunately, in the case of Atari, Commodore, Amiga, a bunch of those computers or consoles just aren't known to this generation. They are, anything before the crash of '83 is just not known to them. So unfortunately, unless you go and do the proper digging, you will not be able to, like, you'll sit here and look at this and go, well, that looks pretty cool, but what is it? It just looks like a keyboard.
Yeah, I mean, for all we know, maybe what we'll see is we'll finally see that mechanic shop finally switch out that old Commodore 64 they've been using to maintain their mechanic shop and just replace it with this one. That's probably the only thing I can really see coming out of this.
Exactly. So, unfortunately, there isn't too much to add on this one. Alex, are you immediately tempted to drop your desire for a PS4 to get yourself a mini Commodore 64?
Absolutely. Sign me up. I want the mini Commodore 64, and I want to play the original Superman 64 on the Commodore 64. Not that crappy Nintendo 64 one, the original Commodore 64 version.
Well, you're going to be disappointed then, because it's not on the list.
Oh, bummer. Yeah. Guess I'll go back to the PS4 then.
I was actually going to say, alert James Rolfe. He may be able to actually finish this Commodore 64 after these many years. So let's go ahead and move on into the next story, which we have earlier this week got announced, but now we can actually go into the details. So we've covered writer strikes, we've covered voice actor strikes on the channel, and this one is an update towards the video game voice actor strike, and we have now seen it set to end. So the Screen Actors Guild has come to an agreement. The agreement basically being that, after running for nearly a year, the strike against 11 video game companies has reached a tentative agreement. There will be a new bonus structure in the form of additional payments, and the bonuses are based on sessions worked. I'm not going to go into the actual numbers here just to not make this complicated, but yeah, based on sessions worked, You will get, well, I guess I can't avoid it, but $75 for the first session and accruing to $2,100 after 10 sessions. The bonus must be paid on or before the game is released, and this appears to be a different arrangement to the revenue-based payments that some developers agreed to back in May. So, like, I believe we actually reported on that it was like they had agreed to a stopgap measure, and that was about it. So we now actually do have SAG-AFTRA's Chief Contracts Officer Ray Rodriguez saying that the new terms are beneficial, they're negotiable, it can all work out, and we may actually be seeing an end to this video game voice actor strike. Does that mean that Steve Bloom can go back to anime? No? Okay.
No.
Sad panda. No, I'm actually
pandas.
very happy about this because I haven't had any of these actual stories myself, but I've been able to meet with a lot of veteran voice actors who have been able to tell me the horror stories that they've had on some of these projects, especially for video games or for animated movies and things like that. And it's damn scary. Like, they'll keep you in for grueling sessions and pay you very little for them. So I do like the fact that since a lot of the actors that I love are devoted to video games, that they're going to be treated better and given better bonuses based on their hard work through their session. Given what the money that they're actually talking about, and I have a feeling that these will get better if, say, a franchise is that beloved, then maybe they'll add bonuses to the actors that especially work their butts off. I'm happy with this, and I'm glad that SAG-AFTRA has also has also said how beneficial it is. But Romney's kind of nodding his head. Do you disagree with it?
No, it's just one of the comments in the IGN article was making me giggle, and I was trying to stifle it because
which one is it?
Basically, well, it started with someone saying it's voice acting; they aren't exactly splitting the atom, and then someone replied, "And yet, voice acting sells a character. Would Solid Snake be as popular if he were voiced by Pee Wee Herman?"
Yeah, I see that now.
Yes, I mean, maybe. It's one of those things where I don't want to necessarily laugh because do I think that actor could pull it off?
Well, I mean, Paul Rubens
motivated, yeah,
maybe.
Well, yeah, Paul Rubens, the actor, could pull it off, but I think the example he was using was if it was Pee Wee Herman in character.
Carter, can you hear me? No, that wouldn't work. The guard spotted me. No, that, and I can't really do a Pee Wee Herman. That would not work at all. But yeah, I think you and I can both kind of agree that this is beneficial to the actors, and it'll help get things back up and running.
Indeed, and especially when you to consider that one of the major reasons the strike happened in the first place was because of the underlying issue of sessions that led to a lot of vocal stress that could leave voice actors basically being physically unable to work for who knows how long because of how strenuous these sessions are. And that was one of the key sticking points of the strike, was trying to find some sort of middle ground. While we've only have the information regarding the bonus arrangements, they haven't really disclosed what's being done for the vocal stress issues, although they have to Ray Rodriguez. He's explained that companies are now going to need to disclose more information about the games, such as code names, what genre, and if any sexual or violent content is featured, which I know for a number of voice actors is an important issue. I mean, when you look at, especially when you look at actors like Vic Mignogna and James Arnold Taylor, who, I mean, to make the example make sense, both are really devout Christians that are very mindful of what kind of roles and what kind of content they lend their voices to. Having such disclosures up front, it would be important, at least for those two, so they can actually, decide if a role or a project is right for them, that is something that they can feel comfortable doing, especially when you consider sexual and violent content, especially for female voice actors especially, it can get pretty dicey.
Well, I was actually going to bring up, like, one of the horror stories that I've actually heard is, I'm not going to say names or anything like that, but an actress actually walked into a job and got the part, was absolutely excited because it was money and, it was money in her pocket. And then she found out later that there was going to be, like, some sexual content, and they would actually need to record, moaning and things like that. And her morals and principles told her she didn't want to do it, but the company basically pulled off the whole thing of, no, you signed a contract, go ahead and start moaning. and that wasn't cool.
Indeed. I mean, it's one thing if you know what's coming and you can actually adequately prepare for it, but when it blindsides you, and I speak from experience when I tried being an actor for a very, very short period of time, when there's something that you're going to be asked to do that you did not expect and it blindsides you, it kind of makes it hard to actually give a convincing performance because you're stuck in that initial shock of the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously in this case, a lot of my wisdom and the knowledge that's been taught to me is like you need to have a thick skin and you need to be able to assert yourself in these situations. I guess the only thing I would bounce back to a lot of people is that this is going to probably encourage some not savvy actors to let their guard down, and no, don't. Because look, here's the thing. I'm not saying that somebody's going to break the rules, but somebody might break the rules, and it's just not a good idea for you to let your guard down in these circumstances. And especially now that you have this thing saying, no, this is not how it works. And no, you must adhere to my rights, kind of thing.
Yeah. Everybody is going to try to find a way around the rules on both sides, and so it's very much you can't let your guard down. I mean, to use a fencing analogy, it's very much, just because you got the touch in the round doesn't mean the other guy's gonna stop trying to get at you. You have to be ready to parry. And I'm butchering the example I was going to use, but you basically boxing, better example. Just because you got one shot in doesn't mean you can't just I got one shot in, yay. No, because for all you know, as soon as you start to celebrate, in comes a right hook and you're down on the mat.
Yeah, just because you got one hit in does not mean that you need to take the gloves down. Nope, you need to keep the gloves up just as much. Alex, after all of these badly done analogies, are you now siding with the people again? Are you siding with the people outside of SAG-AFTRA and saying, no, you know what? I've had to deal with these horrible analogies. Put the strike back on.
In all seriousness, though, I don't even know what you're asking me, but in all seriousness, I'm happy that they've reached some kind of resolution. Voice acting is tough.
I was saying that if we were doing this bad, that you've moved over to the other side of the argument just to be away from us.
No. Okay. So voice acting is tough. You always get these people in the comments and stories like this. It's like, voice acting, it's so easy. No, it's not. It's hard. I mean, trust me, even just doing what I do, regular voice recordings is hard enough, right? And it's taken me quite a while to get used to it. I mean, I still remember recording some of my earliest videos. Boy, that was way harder than you think it would. That's when you get the experience. It's way harder than you think of it. Now, imagine going from just recording your own voice and your own words and your own tone to actually trying to act, trying to take on another character. Now add other kind of stresses factors, like you're a screaming dying soldier in a war game or TV show or movie or whatever,
or a Dragon Ball Z
voice
character.
Actors do, or Dragon Ball Z character, right?
Yeah.
Imagine, really, really big stressful roles like that where you have to really push yourself to the test. I mean, you and I can attest to this, Adam. Just we on Xenogears, when we're playing Xenogears, we have fun trying to make up voices for the characters and all. And, I'm sure nobody will claim that we're great actors in that game, but but that just goes to tell me, it's like just doing what we do on Xenogears, trying to read the text clearly, not stutter, not stumble over words all the time, not mispronounce things. It is already tough enough, and we're doing that live and having fun. These are people who are paid to do this professionally and have practiced many, many years, have worked for many years. Maybe some are starting out, but they're generally working to hone their craft. Voice acting is tough work. They deserve to be fairly compensated.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a great voice actor. I don't know why you're bringing me down like that.
Okay.
But
sorry, I'm not trying to imply you're a bad actor.
But to give a proper example, like he was basically saying, doing this stuff regularly is already taxing enough.
Now in a voice like this, it's not exactly the most fun thing to do for 10 hours in a recording booth. It's not fun.
So at that point, there you go. You have an example for everybody to be able to run into. And that's what voice actors have to do. So for all the people that want to say that it's not hard at all, it's so easy, you sit there in a chair and you read lines, bull to the schnitz. It is very hard.
I challenge anybody who claims that to do it themselves. Go,
Yeah.
and I mean like
And
I want to see them do it.
Yeah, like you need to go
gruelingly.
and audition properly, and you need to deal with the constructive criticism that's going to be coming your way.
And then I want to
Not
see
just
them
cry off in the
be
distance. Deal with it.
Yeah. And I want to see them actually be locked up in a booth. Maybe they get a chair. Maybe they stand. That can be up to them. I mean, they're voice actors who love, like Tom Kenny, for example. He loves to stand when he acts because he likes to be very physical in the booth when he's doing voices.
Well,
Right. Some
it
actors
depends on
say
the-
because it's more comfortable.
It depends on the role too. If you need to be like more
Yeah.
uppity, more uptight and things like that, you might need to stand. But if you're trying to be more relaxed, then sitting actually does help with that. So there you go. Yeah, final thoughts on this one. I'm glad that a settlement is made, and now we can get back to making games and also making awesome characters through the voice actors that do them. But I don't think really we can add too much on this.
Not really.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into our Nintendo talk. So usually Nintendo talk is positive. We love ourselves some Nintendo. Not every time. As we mentioned a few years ago, when Nintendo instituted a new YouTube program, we weren't happy with them. In fact, me and the Shadow Blazer had some choice words for them since we were a starting out channel at that time. We were not particularly happy. And the thing that blows my mind after hearing all of the craptastic stuff that they were offering in their program, people actually signed up for it because they wanted to be able to have monetized Nintendo videos. Okay? Except now, Nintendo's realized that they have a tyrannical fist, and they decided to pump it. And now we have, according to Kotaku, the Nintendo Creators Program will no longer let YouTubers attached to it live stream content. Specifically, the Nintendo content. You can't, so like if you're playing Splatoon 2, you can't live stream it. Let me point that out, the stupidity there, because how many Twitch streamers who, when you're doing Twitch streaming, guys, you're not usually doing like full-on story campaigns, okay? You are doing multiplayer and tons of it. So what you're basically saying to those, if they were on YouTube, is we love the fact that you're playing Splatoon 2, but you can't share your experience with anyone. But that's my bread and butter. Nope, can't do it. Bam! Ban fist. You can't do it. You will get kicked out of this program and therefore not be able to monetize any of your Nintendo content. Or you could go through the extra hassle of setting up a separate channel that goes into the creators program and then only put your Nintendo content in that particular channel. So basically you have to pick and choose what goes where. Now, I manage a couple of YouTube channels. That's hectic to me. That's amazingly hectic to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and let my fellow YouTubers have their comment on the matter. Romney, is Nintendo in the right here?
I just like that person where you have a kid that just keeps doing stuff that you think, okay, maybe this time they finally learn. Maybe this time they'll actually get it in the toilet, and then you open the bathroom door. That's how I'm feeling right now. It's
There's
just
a
Nintendo
dookie on the rug.
Yes, like it's just Nintendo. Just have you not learned anything? And I guess this is the answer: is that no, they haven't. I mean, it's just. I'd get more mad, but I'm just like, this just doesn't surprise me anymore. Nintendo has shown that they're clearly pretty inept when it comes to how the internet works in general. And to add this, it's a case of,
it gets better, Romney, because if people actually look into the comments on the Kotaku article, I like this one especially. They allow random people to stream Nintendo games, but they don't allow people in Nintendo's the Nintendo Creators Program to stream. It makes zero sense to make a service with the word creator in it, but remove all access to streaming on YouTube. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. If you can't create, can you call yourself a creator?
Yeah. Although one commenter on the Kotaku article does bring up a good point, and that probably explains why they made this change. It comes from someone named Poe Gordon, who states, Nintendo is absurdly old-fashioned and alarmist when it comes to the representation of its IP, and I think it really struggles to understand streaming culture. In Nintendo's mind, it fears this imaginary boogeyman situation that someone like PewDiePie is going to live stream Super Mario Brothers and start dropping N-bombs, end quote. And so that would explain why Nintendo is suddenly issuing this change, was probably, once again, them reacting to PewDiePie and a lot of the other related similar incidents.
Thank you, PewDiePie!
Yes, and so I guess after the PewDiePie incident, Nintendo decided to shove their own bro fist up the butts of all the people who signed up for their program.
Well, thanks, Felix. You made our lives even harder. Look, we have no evidence saying that that's the case, but given the timeline, you have to think that was a thing. You have to think that
it's too this is too oddly timed to, I think, be purely coincidental. They may not be saying it directly, but I think it is because of PewDiePie. I think it's, and maybe not just PewDiePie in fairness, I think it's just a streaming culture. And in the case of a lot of cases, it's just Nintendo, they do want to be protective of their IP, of their image, of their brand, and that's the way it's going to be. And I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing more companies go this way because of PewDiePie and other incidents like this, that they just want to be protective of their brand. And, it's everybody knows Nintendo can be pretty puritanical or tyrannical, whatever you want to say, when it comes to the the Let's Plays or streaming or just kind of online interactivity with their videos and such. But, I've noticed Sony, I don't know if it's not necessarily Sony, but it might be. But I've seen this like on certain PlayStation games. So it's like where you'll get this notification that'll pop up streaming or recording, like if you're using their built-in streaming or recording services on a console. This has been suspended for this cutscene. So it's not just Nintendo that does this. Other companies do it too.
No, but the companies eventually, like, they don't redo their software so that your recording device can't record it anyway. So that's one of those things that does happen. It's just it's in Sony's case specifically, it was a dumb idea to implement this. Same thing with Microsoft, because they thought that they would be able to control this. They would be able to control spoilers on the internet roughly through this, and they didn't come, or they either didn't account for or didn't care that there were legitimate recording devices already out there that were going to bypass this stuff. But the one other thing that I wanted to bring up with your talking about it is that, considering their stance, remember, let's take a step back in the Wayback Machine here. What was one of the biggest advertising statements for the Switch? I don't know if people remember this, but this was specifically up on the screen when Splatoon 2's screenshots got debuted. That they wanted to bring esports to the Switch. How can you do that without the community to build with it? And Nintendo, you literally cut the legs and arms off the community. Why do they want to stick with you?
Well, keep in mind, this is not really new, considering that back when this program launched, it's like, oh, you can't do anything related with Pokemon and Smash Brothers. Two big franchises that have large communities.
Or Pokken Tournament. You can't really do that either. You can't do anything with it. I think Mario Kart's also banned, isn't it?
I'm not too sure, but I remember the big things back when we first reported on the program was the fact you couldn't do anything related with Pokemon or Smash Brothers. The two games that...
yeah, because you're talking about the game list. Yeah. And even better, like that... since this is still a thing, I have a feeling that list has been updated and probably taking games out that have been, 3 years old and taken them out of it. So I can guarantee you, yeah, probably like Gen 6 is probably out of that list, but Gen 7 certainly isn't. Breath of the Wild, I can guarantee you, is on that list. You can't do anything Breath of the Wild. Well, that's like one of the most popular games in 2017 thus far. Are you kidding me? Why would you miss out on that opportunity? So this is just another freaking misstep by Nintendo. And I get it, guys. It's like for all the people who are going to send the stuff, because you guys do it every time, it's not Nintendo of America. Nintendo of America loves the YouTube streamers and all that. I get it. It's Nintendo of Japan. They don't understand, and they have no intention of understanding.
Yeah, plus the key thing to remember is, yeah, Nintendo of America may like it, but they answer to Nintendo of Japan at the end of the day. So what Nintendo of Japan says is pretty much what goes. I mean, it's not like with Sega, where Sega actually lets their American partner companies actually have a say. It's very much Nintendo of America is just one link of the tentacle that is the octopus that is Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember like when the new president got brought in, a lot of people were screaming, one of the policies that we would really like this president to put in place, give Nintendo of America and Nintendo of Europe more power. Yeah, that ain't going to happen, people.
Nope.
That ain't going to happen, especially with these beloved properties. So, yeah, unfortunately, it looks like if you want to stream your content, you just ain't getting paid for it.
So basically, the moral of the story is jump ship from Nintendo, either go into PC, PS4, or Xbox One, because at the very least, although they may not have the wide direction that you may like, at least they're not going to come after you for streaming.
You know what? I'm going to reach out to kind of our live chat and also to some of our listeners who know this better than me. Does Twitch have the same issue? Because I don't know, like, I don't even know if Twitch has like a content ID system, and therefore I don't know if Nintendo has been able to take control of it yet. I don't know. But it does make you wonder, like, would this just be one of those things where if you want to stream nothing but Nintendo content, just move over to Switch? I don't know.
Who knows? Especially considering that because keep in mind, all of this news applies specifically to YouTube. We don't know how they're going to go after other streaming services, since other streaming services have their own various checks and balances. I mean, Nintendo, if they were to try to do anything on Twitch, they're going up against Amazon, a major retailer. It's very much
the monetization system on Twitch works a lot different than YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it is also based on the fact that the advertisements that you will get during the stream is going towards stuff you can buy on Amazon, and therefore the streamers will get a cut of that. So
yeah, and so that's a whole separate horse and a whole separate race.
Yeah. Final thoughts before we move on into the entertainment portion of the evening, because Nintendo pisses me off sometimes.
Yeah, I think someone needs to throw them the poison mushroom, because I think their head's swelling a little too much.
See, you go for the minor solution. I'd just say throw a big old blue shell at their main building with a YouTube tag on it saying this is from the fans. Boom!
Yeah, but that's implying that Nintendo's in first place.
Good point. Good point. Alex, anything to add?
Not much will change till Japan ever decides to revise a lot of its copyright laws, which probably isn't going to happen anytime soon.
Yep. Okay, so moving on, we're officially done with our tech portion of the evening, and let's go ahead and go into the entertainment portion, and we're going to be starting with a story that we couldn't get to last week. Unfortunately, I was hoping to get a little bit more developments in it, but right now, as it stands, this is pretty much what we have, and that was the announcement that Damon Lindelof, I think is how you say his name, is now working on a Watchmen TV show for HBO. And here, so we had this news break earlier this year that there was something like this in the works, to which I believe got mixed reactions. Some people love the idea of HBO, the company that makes Game of Thrones, taking on a property like Watchmen, but I know of a lot of people also that are very apprehensive considering the movie and whether or not that lived up to the comic as far as they were concerned. Now you're going to get a TV series based on the Watchmen. Is this a better idea? Is this a worse idea? To be perfectly honest, I haven't read Watchmen all the way through, but I can definitely tell you that it's one of those comics. I don't know if it would ever work in a live action format. Just because there are so many elements that I just don't think you could bring on to modern day television unless you had, granted, this is HBO, so you aren't as restricted. But even then, I would think that HBO would probably restrict some of that stuff based on budget. So, I mean, it's an interesting idea, and I'll probably even look into the HBO series, but I just don't know if it's going to be the most worthwhile thing. What about you, Romney? You're actually the one that tracked down this particular story.
Yeah. In my opinion, honestly, given the culture we live in now where we have superhero movies left and right every single year, I think a Watchmen TV series is in a much better position than the movie was back when it was finally made, because firstly, the Watchmen movie was stuck in development hell for so long. That's why Zack Snyder was the one who ended up directing it, even though people like, I believe Terry Gilliam was approached as one of the possible directors. And so Watchmen, because first off, Watchmen is a long comic series. I mean, it literally is a novel. It takes the term novel from the graphic novel and actually lives up to that name, that yes, it is a novel. It is a sizable read. And something like Watchmen, which is more episodic, feels more at home as a television series, or at least as a mini-series, than as a 2-hour feature film. Because I remember with the extreme, ultimate cut of Watchmen that Snyder finally put out, the film was 5 hours long because it included everything, not just all the events of the comics, but even stuff from Tales of the Black Freighter. So here, at least in terms of format, and at least in the hands of who's guiding it, it's at least in a better position, especially given that now we have superhero movies left and right, and we have, a somewhat unstable political climate in the United States, which is actually very much an echo of what we see in Watchmen, especially considering that in the universe of Watchmen, presidential terms were abolished, meaning that Nixon, in the events of the comic, is on his 5th presidential term, and because of the existence of Dr. Manhattan changing the way Vietnam played out, basically, there's a lot more going on in this day and age that I think allows Watchmen more of a chance to be relevant than the film could ever have been.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, again, it's one of those things where I do believe that if they had the right budget, if they had the right people behind it, then it wouldn't necessarily be harmed by it. I mean, for crying out loud, I actually don't think that this gets enough recognition, but HBO is responsible in part for funding the Spawn animated series that we got, and that actually was really well done for the first few seasons. The later seasons had issues, but I don't know if that's necessarily the animation. I think it was more like Todd McFarlane was kind of moving on. So at that point, I mean, HBO was responsible for that, and I think if you had the right director and the right writers, then the Watchmen works. My only worry about this, again, is budget. If this doesn't do well, HBO is going to start cutting that budget.
Yeah, especially, although to be fair, considering how much money they've put into shows like Game of Thrones, which even then have been getting kind of iffy, if any network could invest the money needed to make a decent adaptation of Watchmen, it would be HBO. A close second would be AMC, but honestly, given that HBO tries to be a bit more graphic with its content, and given that Watchmen is pretty graphic because this is Alan Moore we're talking about, and Alan Moore likes pushing the edges as much as he can, it's probably a much better home for Watchmen than any of the other cable networks that we have.
Agreed. And again, we are talking about Alan Moore stuff here, and frankly, he's got some pretty risque stuff under his belt. And I think if they find the right director that understands the vision and also maybe consults with Alan Moore, I don't know if Alan would take that right now. I do know that Alan tends to separate himself from the works as soon as they're done.
Yeah, especially...
Did he advise for the movie? I don't think he did.
No, basically, after League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Alan Moore basically washed his hands of Hollywood completely and is basically like, I am done. That's why League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the film, is the last film that he ever had a creative consultant credit on. That film, that was basically after that. Not only was it the film that made Alan Moore wash his hands of it, it was the film that made Sean Connery wash his hands of Hollywood. That's how much damage that film had done. Now, yes. I will say this. Damon Lindelof has had a string of successes. I mean, a lot of people know him mostly as the co-creator of Lost. He also had his popular show, The Leftovers, which, based on my understanding, is kind of similar to Left Behind, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong because, again, I don't have cable. Yeah. And so Damon Lindelof may have a better mindset that's being brought to adapting Watchmen as a television series. Because, again, the film version we got had a lot of development problems behind the scenes. And so that's why we ended up with what we got, basically, which, say what you will about Zack Snyder, that's a whole separate thing that we've gone into. It's a dead horse at this point. So
yeah. Alex, you've been kind of quiet on this one. Do you have any particular thoughts on doing a Watchmen series? Whether or not HBO are the people to do it, anything like that? Actually, I'd be curious. Have you even seen the Watchmen movie?
No, I've not seen it. So I don't have any, I've not seen the movie. I've not read the novel. I don't have any strong feelings on it. If there's maybe one thing to say, HBO does make Game of Thrones. Everybody loves Game of Thrones, so maybe there's a silver lining for fans there. I don't know.
Yes, but people love guys, I hate to make this analogy or to make this comparison, but I have to. A majority of that audience is not people who read the books. Okay? A majority of that audience are only interested in them boobs.
The boobs and the gore.
The boobs and the gore. And so
the dragons.
It's like Lord of the Rings for adults. I've literally heard that comparison made to Game of Thrones, and it's not. It's a series, like 80% of the cool stuff in that series is based on political intrigue. And so at that point, it's like, yeah, no. You just like the shock moments is what you like. So at that point, I mean, a lot of people would make that credit that, Game of Thrones, but the difference here is that I believe George works on that writing staff, doesn't he? Am I right about that? I think George R.R. Martin works on that staff, so that's why they're able to do these seasons.
Like to a point, he does consult, but he also has made it clear because people kept asking him about details later on, about the show, to the point where he's had to make it clear, hey, the show's diverged well enough from the books that it's its own separate entity. So stop asking me about what's going to happen, especially considering how long it takes George R.R. Martin to write a book. Granted, that's a whole other separate issue. I don't know about his method. I've seen
I know plenty about his
method. Discussions. I mean, I've seen the interview he and Stephen King gave where they compared their methodologies, and again, that's a whole separate thing. So, yeah, George R.R. Martin is still someone involved as a consultant, but even he's made it clear the show has gone in its own direction and isn't really following the direction of the novels as closely as it did before.
Exactly. So, I mean, for as much people as people want to throw out Game of Thrones, they've been able to make that successfully. Again, different genre, and you have to have the right people involved. And I actually don't know Damon Lindelof because I've not seen Lost. I've not seen anything that he's ever done. So I don't know if he's the guy. But it sounds to me like he would be a writer. So at that point, you still need a director, and the director is going to be the one that overall shapes the vision and says, this is how it's going to work.
Well, see, that's the thing. This is television we're dealing with. Unlike feature films, television can have different directors from every single episode, where it's the showrunner who is usually a writer that will guide the overall feel of the show. And so in this case, it is Lindelof who's going to be guiding this thing. It's not confirmed that he's the showrunner, but he is kind of the main person that is adapting. And so more than likely, at least for the first part of it, he probably is going to be the showrunner. And so that's the thing with television. Unlike film, where directors have all control, writers' rooms, and above the writers, it's the executives. But the showrunner is the one who decides the overall look and feel and voice of a show. And so Lindelof seems to be our guy.
It could be. I will wait with bated breath to see like concept shots and be able to start seeing this series shape. I will especially be interested in the castings of the various roles, but I'm not holding my breath right now. We'll see where development goes, and then we'll be able to make our assessment whether or not this is going to be a good thing.
Yeah. I will say this though: if they get Jackie Earle Haley back as Rorschach, I'm on board, because he was probably one of the best things of the Zack Snyder film was his portrayal of Rorschach.
Yeah, I will agree with that. I'm not necessarily as on board with any of the other portrayals, but if you can bring him back, that'd be great. So final thoughts before we move on into the next story, which I just can't even believe we're reporting this, but anime fans rejoice, I guess. You have a final thought?
I don't know who was saying.
Oh, I thought I saw you raise your hand, Rum. So
that was. Oh, it's just I was adding to your thought where it's saying anime fans rejoice, and I was going to say rejoice in despair.
Yes. So, in case you haven't seen it, which I would actually recommend that you do, Makoto Shinkai's Your Name is going to be getting a live-action Hollywood adaptation with J.J. Abrams in the producer's chair and Eric Heiserer penning the script. So if you don't know Eric Heiserer, he is from Arrival. And so this movie is literally not even a year old at this point. Correct? Incorrect?
Correct.
It's not even.
It is about a year old now.
Well, it's about a year old now, but it's not even a year old right now. And we have a live-action Hollywood adaptation with J.J. Abrams at the helm.
Well, to be fair, it's not J.J. Abrams specifically. It is his company, Bad Robot Productions.
It's Bad Robot.
It is a year.
Bad Robot.
It is officially a year.
Okay.
First came out July 7th. July 3rd, 2016. So yeah, it's officially a year old.
Well, see, that was your problem, Ghost in the Shell. You weren't 1 year old by the time we actually got to your live action adaptation. No, you were like 20 plus years old. That's where you did it wrong. I'm sorry. I can't hammer this in even more. It's a year old and it has one. Apparently this moved Eric Heiserer to want to pen the script. But yeah, Bad Robot Productions is going to be producing a live action adaptation of Makoto Shinkai's Your Name. The article that we're going off of is from Anime News Network. And we do and Lindsay Weber from Bad Robot will be producing the film alongside Genki Kawamura, the original film's producer, the animated movies, and Academy Award nominated screenwriter Eric Heiserer for Final Destination 5 and Arrival, who will be penning the script. So I guess the real story about this is not necessarily who's already in charge and that this is happening. From my perspective, it's the fan backlash or adoration that has been happening with this. So immediately when I saw it, I went to social media, and that's the thing I shouldn't have done because that's where it's all 50-50. I don't know where I was going with the singing, but I was going there. This is one of those movies that now that it's been announced, there is love for it. There is hate for it. It exists. And we've heard various opinions on this already. I do know that the Anime News Network podcast did their take on it. I know that a few other anime podcasts have let their opinions known. Some of them are absolutely happy about it. Some people think we need to wait. Me personally, I just think, wow, Hollywood is extremely lazy if they went to a movie that's only a year old based on a manga to fill out their movie year.
Well, to be fair, given how quickly we got the Fred movies on Nickelodeon, this is Hollywood being Hollywood.
Yep. That's what I was trying to say here. This is Hollywood being Hollywood.
Because remember, this movie did gangbusters overseas. In Japan, it really broke all kinds of records. It's among their top highest grossing films. It's not number one, but it's among, I think in the top 10 percentile there.
Did it
At least in the top 10 highest grossing. What?
Did it break any records here?
Here, I don't.
Because it was
I
a
don't
limited
know.
screening
I know
movie,
it.
and I heard it did really, really well for a limited screening movie.
It actually did pretty well for a non-Studio Ghibli film from not Disney. It did pretty damn well for an anime film here. I think it even had a better per average theater gross than Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Because it came out about the same time.
Yeah, it looks like they earned an estimated $5 million and change in the United States and Canada.
Yeah, looking at the official records, it's the 4th highest grossing film of all time in Japan, the 2nd highest grossing Japanese film, 2nd highest grossing anime film, and is the highest grossing anime film of all time worldwide.
What's the first one? That actually does make me wonder. Spirited Away, yeah. Okay, never mind. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I especially like, because to let people in on the behind-the-scenes stuff, when Alex... I've been abusing the crap out of the fact you could comment with GIFs, and so I commented with a GIF of Stanley from The Office.
You might need to say that again, because unfortunately the lag cuts you out.
I see. Well, to kind of explain, when Alex posted the announcement to our little secret Facebook group, I responded with a GIF of Stanley from The Office rolling his eyes, because that's my thing. I abuse that GIF commenting to no end. And he actually found an interesting reaction, because apparently I'm not the only one having the same reaction, as a mangaka basically posted a parody comic that I think accurately predicts what Hollywood will try to do and then end up bumbling through this adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is laden with a lot of stereotypes Japan has about the United States. I mean, that is the grain of salt I would put there, but
America was the only one that had those? No.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, the sad part is it pretty much hits all the beats where you can see where there could be some good ideas implemented in the adaptation, but Hollywood is not going to actually commit to those ideas because they want to keep it nice and safe and accessible as possible to make more money.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad you put in that GIF, because I was literally tempted to pull out the facepalm GIF that I tend to use on a lot of this stuff. She's like, no, I'm not surprised by this in the slightest. What was that?
Is it the Picard one where he's like kind of looking like he's
no the 3 take, the boom boom boom.
Oh yeah, the one that Linkara always uses.
Yes, because that was literally my reaction. I'm like, really? This movie has before anime fans jump down my throat, I liked Your Name. We have a podcast where I said I like Your Name. I don't have a problem with it getting a live action adaptation. It deserves it. I'm just saying I would have not had a problem with it if this thing had come 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and this just makes me go, wow, Hollywood is damn lazy right now.
Equal parts laziness, but also desperation, because let's face it, in the wake of Ghost in the Shell and Death Note, the Hollywood system is desperate for some sort of live-action anime adaptation success story. I mean, we still are a few years off before we'll get any inkling.
You didn't even mention all the movement for Akira. So Akira is actually buzzing again.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, we're still a few years away from seeing any signs from Battle Angel Alita, which is the only one currently in any form of development or production. And so that's the only one we've got on the horizon. Akira has been on the table. There's been rumors of a Cowboy Bebop live action show that's in the works. It's very much every studio and their mother is trying to create some sort of success story here. And so I'm guessing they're just like, hey, let's take something that's newer. But again, it's one of those things where they're desperate. And I think the big thing here is they decided to snatch it up now while it's still relevant to see if they can use that relevance to basically power through all of the development problems, because that's what they tried to do with Ghost in the Shell. That's what they've been trying to do with Cowboy Bebop and Akira. But with varying degrees of, well, not success. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's also just one of those things where I'm not saying that this film can't be done in live action or it can't be adapted to US audiences. I think it could be. But it would take correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, it would take a lot of work to be able to do it. There's a lot of Japanisms in there.
Yeah, one of the big things that I started really kind of thinking about, because, you know, when I was reading the novel, even I kind of pictured what this could look like if it was live action. But one of the big things I'm thinking about here, just from trying to make this essentially westernized, because, you know, they're going to do that, is how they're really going to adapt the most pivotal, essential moment of the film. And this is a bit of a spoiler alert here for anybody. In fact, just to be really safe, if you're watching this on camera right now, I'm going to... All right. When you see the spoiler little tagline go away, that means we're done spoiler talk here. But so, spoilers here. The pivotal moment of the scene is the boy, Taki. He goes up to where the shrine was that Mitsuha was the shrine maiden for. And of course, through ritual ceremony, he manages to go through space and time and reconnect her. This is very simplified as I can put it in the short amount of time we have. But it's sort of, he goes to the shrine to reconnect to her spiritually through space and time. There's a lot of these spiritual elements to it. It's a very beautiful scene. Trust me, it's a lot better than the way I'm just briefly describing here. So that is going to be incredibly hard to adapt here because that is very much Japan. Another big element of the film that they talk about throughout the film is the Red String of Fate, which is a Japan folk story, is the whole idea of that people are connected through like a red string of fate. So that's really the biggest battle.
I don't know if that's as hard as you think it is, because I mean, literally all you have to do is just say this is a tidbit of folklore from this local area. Because here's the thing, like you can't. In some cases, a live action adaptation will actually base this in Japan. Okay, there's a chance that will be what they do.
I wouldn't count on that. Come on, even Death Note.
Hold on. More than likely,
had to relocate to Seattle.
We will get the Death Note treatment, and this will be based in random American town, and they will take the Red String of Fate and say, "Oh, this is based on old Native American lore because we can do that. We're Hollywood." Yuck. So I mean, I didn't say that it was going to be explained well, Alex, but they could do it.
Yeah. The other thing to consider with the red string thing, it's not just it's like a cultural thing. It's beyond just, having to explain this as a cultural thing. It's also a case of, in Japan, it's used as cultural shorthand for a lot of things. Because, again, we do it all the time in the US as well, where we use imagery an audience is familiar with to convey an idea. I mean, to use a classic example, when you look at the animated film Hercules from Disney, when Hercules goes to the Temple of Zeus, he prays the way a Christian would pray, because that's what most American audiences associate with prayer, whereas if they wanted to be accurate, he would have had to bring a calf, slit its throat on the steps, and so on and so forth. And so it's a case of, unless they decide to like get Mark Burnett and Roma Downey involved, that would be the only way I could see them trying to translate some of that spiritualist aspects to it, which again could work if they actually commit to the idea. And again, this is an extreme example. I'm not saying they're going to actually get Mark Burnett and Roma Downey involved, but if that would be one way they could try to transplant that spiritual core of the story. But even then, it's a tough sell because, again, there are a lot of things that aren't going to translate.
Not only that, but, I mean, the other problem that I see with this is, again, Your Name is the equivalent, and you guys will have an argument with me, and I understand, but as far as U.S. audiences are concerned, it's going to be perceived as a rom-com, okay? And in order to cater to the rom-com audience, to be able to get as many of them to come and see this movie, I'm thoroughly convinced you don't even have to worry about all of this because a lot of that is going to get hacked in the writing room because we can't explain a meteor falling down. No, we have to do it another way. No, we can't explain a red string of fate because we can't be able to make that work. And this will be a dumbed down version of what's this bucket movie that involved Keanu Reeves and I can't remember her name, Miss Congeniality, where they were like out of time for like a week and their mailboxes shared. That's how this will be played out on a US audience.
I think that's called The Lake House, I think is what it was called.
That's what I'm saying is that they will distance themselves enough from those elements that it doesn't even matter because they need to bring in the rom-com crowd.
Yep. Now, to be fair, I can see some potential with the concept of Your Name. And it's an idea that came to me when reading that parody reaction comic from that mangaka. The whole notion of, having the main guy be from New York and having the main girl be from New Orleans. And I'm thinking, okay, something like that could work if you actually decide to acknowledge and comment on the race factor. I mean, really think about it. How different would the story be if that was an added factor? Because let's face it, Japan is incredibly homogenized. Racism is not as big of an issue in Japan as it is here in the United States. If they go that angle and actually acknowledge it and use the concept of Your Name to actually comment on it, it could work. It could actually be a very powerful thing. But we're probably not going to get it. But then again, given that the writer who wrote Arrival, which in turn was a very powerful film commenting, and some people even arguing as an allegory for immigration, I mean, something like that, if they actually do something with that concept, the film could actually be pretty powerful. I don't have faith they're going to do it, but there is an inkling there.
Yeah, I think I think the problem there, Romney, is that I believe you would write that well. I don't think the person that's going to get assigned to this thing is going to write that well. So that's kind of the issue there. That's the disappointing part, is that unfortunately where Romney will make it work and Romney will go to great lengths to make it work, the writer that's going to get brought on this is not going to give a damn.
Well, and even then,
I get that we have Eric Heiserer, but you're going to have additional writing staff so he can take care of the more pivotal moments. Then you're going to hire a bunch of writers that aren't going to get it.
Well, the big worry is not so much the writers, it's the executives in charge. That's the thing. It's the executives that are going to be making those demands. Because even if a writer is brought on who actually cares about the project, who knows when an executive will give a note that may push the writer too far. I mean, we've already been seeing this happen with the Star Wars films.
Star Wars, Marvel, a number of other places where this has been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's one of those things where, again, I'm just kind of my final thoughts on the matter is that movie was beautiful. A U.S. adaptation, I have no faith right now in it being as beautiful as that. I really do think that a lot of the aspects that are beloved are going to be sent right to the cutting room floor. And that's sad. I mean, I could be proven wrong, and I have no problem being proven wrong in this aspect. But unfortunately, this just feels like a quick cash grab from Hollywood, and it will be treated just like all of the other quick cash grabs. So that's the unfortunate part here. Final thoughts before we move into the last story of the night.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of confidence in this either.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and so now that we've talked about this live action adaptation, I get to have my own personal vengeance against Alex for bringing this up. Because now he has to talk about this too, and listeners asked for it. So not only is there going to be a live action Your Name movie adaptation that is going to be happening, but we reported on this, I want to say a good couple of months ago, that there was talks of this happening. Now it looks like it might actually happen. So Patrick Massett and John Zinman, if you don't know who they actually are responsible for the 2001 edition of Tomb Raider. They were the producers, I believe, involved in that one. No, they wrote the screenplay for it. And they have now become the writers for Sword Art Online, the live-action TV series. And it just goes from bad to worse. I mean, at least with Watchmen, I have faith. I have at least some inkling that maybe it'll be treated well. Sword Art Online. That's definitely not getting treated well. So yeah, as reported by Deadline, Massett and Zinman will write, executive produce, and serve as showrunners on Skydance's upcoming television adaptation for the popular Japanese light novel and anime series. And here are a couple of quotes from them. We're already deep in development with Patrick, John, and Leda on our larger-than-life Skydance SAO series, in which we aim not only to satisfy the franchise's enthusiastic sci-fi and anime fan base, but also to appeal to new TV audiences the world over. It's about people being stuck in a video game. That's gonna go.
And not a very good one, I might add.
Yep. I mean, I even like how one of the comments in the IGN article says, "Oh dear God, no! The source material is derivative enough as it is."
Yep. There's already so many problems that could arise out of this, out of just the announcement here. But this is like, okay, so you now have to make this work. And I have no idea how you'll make it work. I literally have.
It's really not that hard to be. I gotta say, of all the anime out there, this one probably isn't hard at all. Sword Art Online, there's not a lot of depth to it. It's shallow as can be. It's derivative as can be too. It's really so simple. It's like I'd be hard pressed to see Hollywood fuck this one up.
Well, the only thing that I would say that they could F up is, look at all of the adaptations that we've had, so far of dude who's in a video game. Literally, the first thing that comes to my mind, in my opinion, is that X-Files episode. And it's not like, that's not even a modern example. So look, when it comes to character development and relationships and all that stuff, Alex, you're exactly right. It is not that hard to do. Some of that is as basic as it could possibly be. Sorry, Sword Art Online fans. I'm just speaking the way I sees it. And the only problem that I have here is that there's no way possible that Hollywood is going to dole out the amount of money, or Skydance is going to dole out the amount of money to make this actually feel like a video game. There may be fantasy settings and you might get those, but I have a feeling that they're going to do more of a derivative of the outside portion of it, which in the first season, you can't even do that. 80% of it is in the dang game.
Well, to be fair, I remember when we first reported on this adaptation happening, it was being marketed to the CW.
Yes.
And honestly, as a CW, I can see Sword Art Online as a series on the CW. I mean, it is as shallow and as pandering as ever that it would actually feel right at home. And the other thing to consider is making it feel like a video game actually is a bit easier when you consider, you can make very stylized UI because you don't have to put nearly as much polish in stylized effects as you have to do in realistic effects. And so having some sort of an overlay over the characters, I mean, it's in effect fairly easy. I mean, multiple YouTube videos. I mean, how many of us have seen a video of people doing live action recreations of the Final Fantasy VII battle system? It's actually a pretty easy process to do. So, I'm kind of with Alex on this one. This is probably the one series that is almost impossible to not screw up. I mean, if anything, they're mainly making it better than the original series, because at the very least, you may get the guarantee that at least the people working on it have a better understanding of how games work than, the original person who wrote the light novels.
But do they really, Romney? Do they really?
More than the guy who wrote the light novels. I mean, really, when you look at how Sword Art Online as an MMO functions, you can tell the guy, the original creator, had no idea what the hell he was writing about.
Oh, so, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is... Yeah, and I mean, especially when you consider, this is supposed to be virtual reality, they could even do away with the whole overlay HUD and just basically go with the, we'll basically shoot on the same budget as Legend of the Seeker and basically just have everyone talking like normal because, this is virtual reality, everything looks real, and therefore you don't have to actually worry about putting a HUD or anything. I mean, I'm just looking at this, I'm just like, okay, for once, I can actually see where Skydance is coming from. This actually looks like something that would be that would be very easy to adapt a way that, I mean, it's not going to necessarily be better or worse. I'm just looking at this, and it's a case of it's actually plausible it could actually be done.
It's plausible, but being done well, that's where I have the problem, especially when we're talking
What's there
about
to do well, Adam? What's there to do well? It's Sword Art Online. There's literally nothing that can do to
are we
make it
good
work.
now? Again,
I
Alex,
can't understand
calm thyself, Alex. Calm thyself. Okay, in case people can't tell this in the chat, Alex doesn't like Sword Art Online. What he doesn't mean to acknowledge here is that there are people who actually do, and they want
there are
it
people
done
who like
right.
it.
And so at that point,
but like I said,
my argument is Patrick Massett and John Zinman, the guys who did Tomb Raider, the guys to do it? And I would tell you, hell to the no.
Well,
To that, though, I would...
Go ahead, Rodney.
Well, to that, I would rebut. They also worked on Friday Night Lights, which was a teen drama on NBC. And so, if they're not going to do the fantasy and game concepts well, that means, okay, we can't do the video game stuff that much. That means we have to pretty much put all of our focus to the romance. And let's face it, even with the naysayers, from what I've heard, the romance, now granted, it's not perfect, but they say that's probably the bigger focus of the show. And so, if you're wanting to basically rebrand this as some sort of romance series that just happens to be set in the world of a video game, that makes it even easier to adapt.
I actually think that would be a must. I think you absolutely have to go down that direction, because I just don't see the game elements here, like the actual combat, being able to portray monsters, things like that. I don't see that working. I think they'll have to get shown on like, if we're going to, let's just say for the sake of argument, we're going to mimic season 1 beat for beat, you will have big monsters that do have to be shown on camera. And yeah, if you do the Legend of the Seeker budget, you could probably do it and at least make it adequate. But the other problem too is that you kind of mentioned this, and I think it needs to be mentioned again. This is based off a guy's creation where he didn't even know how games really worked. And now I can pretty much guarantee that the other people are going to know how they work. And so at that point, I kind of wish that they would just take that aspect out of it altogether. But you can't, because it's all based in that first season. But to immediately get Alex off my back, I agree with you. The story is so freaking simplistic, they could easily make it work. This series could literally write itself in that regard, but there are fans, Alex. There are fans.
I know they're fans.
I would actually dare say you get into arguments with them on an every other week basis.
Not as often as you might think, believe it or not, but I know there are fans, but again, my point is this show is like pretty much idiot-proof because there's pretty much nothing to it. Even some of the fans acknowledge how stupid the show is.
Yeah, that's actually true too. The fans do actually acknowledge it because the one person I'm thinking of in particular, yeah, he even acknowledges it's not the greatest thing ever.
I mean, like, yeah, the one aspect you've mentioned, the uphill battle, is the effects for the monsters. But come on, even sci-fi can pull up some shitty CGI. I'm sure they can do it too.
Well, but that's immediately assuming that it's going to sci-fi.
I'm just saying. I'm using sci-fi. Sorry, I'm using sci-fi as a general example. If a low grade.
This is a series you think sci-fi would pick up, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to sci-fi, but I'm saying like if that channel can manage CGI effects for its own original movies, terrible as they may be, they have a cult following enough, though. I mean, yeah. How many people love the whole Sharknado series because they're so funny and stupid, but it's like, geez, sci-fi can do it. These people will be able to do it, no problem. The CGI may not be great.
I would actually say sci-fi, I think, is the only channel that could make it work. Not discounting Romney's argument. I think if we were talking the CW of maybe 10 years ago when Legend of the Seeker was a thing, then they could do it. I don't know if the current day CW could, though.
Well, given just the premise of creating a live action, basically, it pretty much writes itself. It's basically about video games, so you've got that market cornered. It's about, you've got the romance aspect, which is basically what the CW keeps trying to push with stuff like Riverdale and a couple of the other shows. And so it would feel pretty much right at home. It's in the same, it's pretty much would be tailor-made for the exact demographic that the CW as a network exists for, which is teenagers. And so that would probably be, I mean, sci-fi, yeah, they could do it, but when you're looking in terms of how broad you want this to reach, strategically the CW would be a better network to try to pitch this to. I mean, they'd be
I agree with that. I agree with that because the teenage audience is already there for them. I'm just saying when it comes to stuff like this, it feels more like sci-fi would be the way to go. But I agree with your assessment on the matter. I really wish we could add anything more to this, but it looks like we're going to have showrunners and things like that. Final thoughts before we wrap up the podcast, because I don't think there's really anything else we can add to this.
Don't screw this up.
I just want my epic. Yeah, don't screw this up. And I just want my. Most of the music in the show I thought was forgettable, but I still want my epic rendition of Swordland, which was the best tune in the whole damn series, and the only song worth writing home about for as Sword Art Online's music goes. So, damn it, I want my Swordland rendition.
Yeah, and I will say this, although Alex has made a pretty clear point that this is idiot-proof, this is Hollywood we're dealing with. I mean, to quote Dr. Ian Malcolm, life finds a way.
Life finds a way. All right. Well, I think that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. We've had a lot of interesting stories to be able to go and talk to, and I'm sure we will have plenty more the following week. But in the meantime, if people want to be able to talk to us about the various stories that we've discussed tonight, Alex the Shadow Blazer, how do they get a hold of you to share their opinions and whatnot?
You can find me here on YouTube. Shadow Blazer 3000 is my channel, and I, of course, do anime content here. And if you want to be up to date on when I put out new videos, follow me on Twitter at AlexJShort.
All right. And Stephen Romney, how do people get a hold of you to be able to share their various opinions on the content that you create, as well as see the content that you create?
Well, you can always find me on YouTube at youtube.com/StudioGhostUtah. You can also find me on VidMe at vid.me/StudioGhost. I am also on Facebook at facebook.com/Romney'sReviews, no apostrophe. And I am at Romney Reviews on Twitter. And for this week's Romney's recommendation, since we talked about Watchmen being adapted as a television miniseries, my recommendation for this week is actually Watchmen, the complete motion comic. If you're someone who doesn't quite have the time to sit down and read the graphic novel, well, this is actually a pretty good alternative if you're basically wanting a book-on-tape version of Watchmen that just happens to have the pictures from the graphic novel. I mean, it literally is like a book on tape where it's the one voice actor reading all the characters' lines. But if you're wanting to get basically familiar with the story but don't have time, like say if you're working on something and want background noise, it's good for that.
I would agree on that. And actually, it's one of the few motion comics that I've like the motion comics on DVD that I've been able to get behind and works. That's actually how I've seen a good portion of Watchmen myself. So there you go. We have another Romney's recommendation in the books. And if people want to get a hold of me, the best ways to be able to do so is you can reach out to me on Twitter at Drac2326. You can also now reach out to me in my Facebook page for my YouTube channel, which is at DracLP. So all you got to do is look for facebook.com/DracLP, and you'll be able to reach out to me there. Now, if you guys want to get show your support for the podcast as well as be able to listen to episodes, the first thing that we would recommend is that you go to our RSS feed, which is geekyweek.podomatic.com, and support us there. Follow it, be able to bookmark it and all that so you can get the most recent episodes into your iPhone, iPod, whatever you're listening to these on. In fact, the most recent last week's episode is up, so you guys will be able to enjoy that. And we are working very hard to get everything else in the books there. But we would very much appreciate that you guys go to geekyweek.podomatic.com first. Then please go and support us on our various social media, which is basically all under the same name now. So you can support us on Twitter at GeekyNRO, as well as go to Facebook and look for facebook.com/GeekyNRO, and you'll get up-to-the-minute information when we're going live, the stuff we'll be discussing, the stuff that maybe may not make the list, and we still want to get you guys' opinions. All of that will be able to be there. And if you want to submit stories that we can discuss on Geek News, as well as be able to give us some constructive criticism, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. And we actually do take those things into account. In fact, one of the things I found funny was we actually did get a comment last week basically saying, I like the Romney's recommendations. I really wish you guys would make them longer. And it's like, we actually have to discuss that. We haven't thought about that. This is entirely a Romney thing. I didn't tell him to do it. I know a lot of people think that I did tell him to do it. I didn't do any such thing. So that's definitely something we can talk about. But that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. We thank you guys so much for stopping in, for listening to the stories that we had, as well as being able to support the podcast as well as you guys do. We love our community. We love you guys deeply. But that's going to go ahead and do it for us. So we'll see you guys next week with even more geek news, reviews, and opinions. So for me, for Alex, and for Romney, we'll see you guys next time.